Right, so horrendous scenes in Lebanon and particularly southern Beirut overnight as news comes out that the attack, which saw 6 residential tower blocks destroyed, was an attempt to take out Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. All of this comes, of course, just days after a joint US and French ceasefire initiative was finalised to bring about an end to the war in Gaza. Sure, getting Israel to agree with it was never likely. Netanyahu cannot afford to end his war. He wants it bigger and wider. So the fact he launched this attack on Lebanon should once again remind Western leaders like Biden and Macron that they are a laughingstock trying to rein in this deranged madman whose only route to staying in power is to keep this aggression going. But they aren't the only ones whose cheeks should be burning with humiliation right now. The entirety of the UN ought to be as well, though especially the US, since the UN General Assembly is located there. And whilst we may have smiled and clapped as Netanyahu took to the stage to address them yesterday, not for his speech, but because so many UN delegates walked out as soon as he arrived, what has gone far less reported is that it has now been alleged that Netanyahu gave the order to strike Lebanon from within UN headquarters. He isn't just ignoring world leaders, he's openly laughing in their faces.
I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Order, please. Ladies and gentlemen, order. Order, please.
Right, so that was a bit of footage there of the UN General Assembly Hall and the desertion of a significant number of diplomats, a lot of empty seats, as you can appreciate, when it was announced that Benjamin Netanyahu was about to address them. Nothing quite nails the world view of Israel right now than scenes like that, because it is quite easy to assume the support for Israel, especially if you only get your news from the mainstream media, poor things. The global support is there just because Western support remains strong. Our governments are very much the exceptions, much to all of our shame and humiliation. But to the shame and humiliation of the UN itself, after that speech, full of self-pity and victimhood and mad-eyed aggression, as it always is when Netanyahu orates, after that speech, it is alleged that the order to strike Lebanon in an operation called New Order was given by Netanyahu directly from UN headquarters, as this image appears to show. If true, if legitimate, and certainly we know that's where Netanyahu was yesterday ahead of the strike, it shows beyond doubt US complicity in these ongoing war crimes. Not to mention the UN's toothlessness and utter failure to bring Israel to book for what is out-and-out terrorism. And that operation name, New Order, is pretty salient, given the apparent need for that in more places than just Israel right now. Operation New Order has seen 6 residential tower blocks brought down by Israeli forces, jets, in what is being described as the most intense night of fighting between Israel and Lebanon since the days of the 2006 war. Residential buildings were flattened, extensive damage to other nearby structures, the claims being by Israel that the target for their operation was Hezbollah's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, and that the true target was Hezbollah headquarters located below these buildings. Now, even if that were true, those buildings would have been full of innocent people. Again, the value Israel places on innocent lives is non-existent. They will cut through anyone or anything, it seems, to achieve their aims, and although overnight there have been disputed claims over the fate of Hassan Nazrallah as a result of this horrendous attack, it has now been confirmed by Hezbollah, as I was writing this, that Nasrallah has indeed been killed. The guy who has been in charge of Hezbollah for something like the last 30 years means now anything is possible by way of retaliation. Nasrallah was seen as a pragmatist by a great many people, a guy who didn't rise to every bit of Israel's or Netanyahu's baiting. But who knows what direction they'll now take over whoever replaces him. An assassination possibly ordered from within the UN. Israel dropped 85 bunker buster bombs, each carrying a ton of explosives on a residential area of Beirut to take out Nasrallah. That isn't a targeted strike. That's laying waste to a city. The bombs, according to reports from the Cradle, were Mk-84 bunker busters, which are manufactured, guess where? Yes, The US, so they are now complicit in war crimes against Lebanon. How nice of Antony Blinken to ensure another $8.7 million worth of aid is now heading to Israel following all of this. I really do think it is about time Americans asked themselves seriously just who exactly does this dual US-Israel citizen who is their Secretary of State really work for? A guy who, it turns out, lied about Israel not blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza so they could continue to supply the genocidal state with aid. Hilariously, the US has denied involvement, however. Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh told reporters that the United States was not involved in this operation and we had no advanced warning, but then went on to say that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was in contact with his Israeli counterpart Yoav Gallant as the operation was already underway. Your bombs were used, you're complicit, and you can't even get your own story straight. The day at the ICJ cannot come fast enough for the US in light of this last year of atrocity since the night of October 7th, for everything Israel has been unable to do, quite honestly. Especially since this operation was triggered whilst the Israeli PM was on your soil and at the UN, within UN headquarters, at that it seems. The death toll since Monday in Lebanon has now topped 700, but that is before the casualty rate from this latest attack has been counted. Israel's attacks include the targeting, as has become customary and typical of them, of medical facilities, with at least 11 medical personnel having been killed. Israel have apparently also hacked Beirut airport, turning away an Iranian passenger plane. But this has been followed up by numerous airlines once again cancelling flights to Israel. British Airways, Iberia, Air France and Aegean Airlines have all cancelled flights. So again, Israel takes an economic hit from its own aggression. Hezbollah have released a statement following the confirmation of Nasrallah's death, as reported by Middle East Eye, reading, in a statement released on Saturday, Hezbollah confirmed that its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed yesterday in an Israeli strike, calling him a martyr on the path to Jerusalem and Palestine. His Eminence, the leader of resistance, the righteous servant, has departed to be with his Lord and his pleasure, a great martyr, a courageous and wise leader, joining the ranks of the luminous martyrs of Karbala in the divine and faith-filled journey, following the path of the prophets and the martyred imams, said Hezbollah in a statement. His Eminence Syed Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary-General of Hezbollah, has joined his esteemed martyrs who have remained immortal. For nearly 30 years he led them from victory to victory, succeeding the master of martyrs of the Islamic resistance in 1992, through the liberation of Lebanon in 2000, to the divine victory in 2006, and all battles of honour and sacrifice, culminating in the battle of support and heroism for Palestine, Gaza, and the oppressed Palestinian people, the statement read. Israel has killed Nasrallah. If they wanted that escalation, if they wanted their war, they've now got 1,000 Nasrallahs potentially facing them, and they'll have more besides. As part of the so-called axis of resistance, this is certainly how Iran refer to their group of allies, isn't it? The West calls it all Iran and their proxies, of course, but Iran haven't taken this attack on Hezbollah lightly, as you can imagine. The last time Iran escalated to the point they put troops themselves in Lebanon was back in 1981, when Israel invaded, an invasion which later led to the creation of Hezbollah itself in response. Yet now, 43 years later, it's being reported that they are preparing to do so again. Iranian troops heading to Lebanon. The Iranian Deputy for International Affairs, Mohammed Hassan Akhtari, is quoted by NBC as saying, with public registration, officials will certainly grant permission for the deployment of forces to Lebanon and the Golan Heights. That's expected in the coming days. However, another member of this axis of resistance, who have also pledged to send troops to Lebanon if need be, but did so actually more than a week ago, saying if matters escalate in Lebanon, that they'll be going to fight there too, are the Houthis in Yemen. A short excerpt from Middle East Monitor on this from the 18th of September reads, remarking on Israel's threats to expand confrontation on its northern front with Lebanon, Deputy Head of the Houthis Media Authority, Nasser al-Din Amer, said, we are confident in Hezbollah's ability to strike the Israeli occupation with a decisive blow, and we will be by their side in any confrontation. We are ready to send hundreds of thousands of trained fighters if needed, and we will support them in the same way we support the resistance in Palestine, he added. If Netanyahu wanted his wider war, it looks like he's going to get it. But how any Western leader can try and justify aiding Israel after this and sell that to their public, their voters, well, good luck with that, and you're a scumbag if you even try it. Well, we know so many of them are going to. The likes of Biden and Blinken and Starmer and Macron and von der Leyen would go to the aid of a guy who just leveled 6 residential buildings with all the casualties that'll go with that. You get one man as it was, and did it from a seat at the UN, the body that is meant to stand to prevent escalation to another widespread or world war, and yet is being enabled to do so because no matter how out of control Israel gets, it's a project that just cannot be allowed to fail in the eyes of too many governments themselves infiltrated and heavily influenced by the Israel lobby. They'll go to the aid of a man who claims Hezbollah have a rocket in every kitchen, in every garage, in every school and hospital, every building you can think of. So he can claim there is actually no such thing as civilian space in Lebanon. So he can do to Lebanon what he's already done and is still doing in Gaza, where the official death toll now tops 41,000. If Israel, after Netanyahu called it this attack at the UN itself, tarnishing and trashing everything the UN is supposed to stand for, openly mocking them in their own building, doesn't have its membership suspended or expelled at this point, then it really is an utterly useless institution until and unless wider reform is implemented. It's one insult surely that goes too far now. Of all the countries that could become involved in a wider war, however, the one that could actually give the US the most problems is Turkey. Find out exactly why they uniquely could put the US between a rock and a hard place in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hope to catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.